save us.
Do not look for the beginning of the end in the fire. Fire cleanses. Fire is honest. Fire screams before it burns. No, the death of Lordaeron did not arrive with the roar of dragons or the thunder of fell cannons. It arrived in silence. It arrived on the creaking wheels of heavy carts, rolling lazily down the sun-drenched roads of the Eastweald. To understand the tragedy, you must first remember the light. In those final days, the capital city was blinding. The white marble of the palace reflected the sun with such intensity that it felt divine, as if the holy light itself had petrified into stone to shelter the line of Menethil. We walked through streets that smelled of summer rain and fresh-baked bread, believing that the wars of the past were just stories to frighten children. We believed that the Orcish horde was broken, that the darkness had been pushed back to the edges of the map. We were arrogant. We were comfortable. And in our comfort, we failed to notice the color of the wheat in the northern fields. It was a golden age, they said. But gold is heavy, and it is cold, and it blinds those who stare at it too long. While King Tyrannos sat upon his throne, confident in the stability of his realm, the soil itself was turning against us. Picture a single crate, simple wood stamped with the seal of Anderhall. Inside, the grain looks pristine. It pours like sand, heavy and rich. But listen closely to the silence between the stalks. There is no hum of insects, no rustle of mice. Nature knew before we did. The plague was not an invasion. It was a pollution. It turned the very act of sustenance, the breaking of bread, into a sentence of undeath. The kingdom of Lordaeron was not conquered. It was digested. And the man who would oversee this funeral pyre was the very one we prayed would save us. The Golden Prince. The boy who carried the weight of a mountain on his shoulders, unaware that the ground beneath his feet was already turning to ash. To understand the monster, you must first mourn the man. Arthas Menethil was not born cruel. He was the product of a kingdom that demanded perfection. He was the Golden Son, raised to believe that a king's duty is absolute protection. But the light is a rigid teacher. It deals in absolutes, darkness and dawn, good and evil. It does not teach a paladin what to do when the innocent become the weapon. And this was the trap. This was the psychological fracture point. We look back and we blame the Dreadlord, Mal'Ganis. We call him the architect of this madness. And true, he was the shadow in the alley, the whisper in the dark. But Mal'Ganis did not break Arthas. He simply presented him with an equation that the Holy Light could not solve. At Hearthglen, the prince watched his own people consume the poisoned grain. He watched fathers and mothers, people he had sworn to defend, convulse and rise as mindless husks. In that moment, something vital in Arthas snapped. He realized that to save the kingdom, he had to destroy the citizenry. The logic was hideous. It was cold. But to him, it was necessary. Opposing him stood Uther the Lightbringer, the mentor, the legend. Uther was a mountain of silver and righteousness, the living embodiment of the Paladin's code. But mountains do not move. When Arthas begged for a solution, Uther offered only moral outrage. He spoke of honor while the infection spread. To the frantic eyes of the prince, Uther's hesitation looked like cowardice. It looked like complicity. And then there was Jaina, the anchor. She was the only one who could have reached him. The only voice that might have cut through the roaring static in his head. But even she recoiled. She saw the manic gleam in his eyes, the obsession not with saving lives, but with punishing the perpetrator. When she turned away, when she faded into a portal of arcane brilliance, she took the last of his humanity with her. He was left alone, isolated by his own conviction. The anomaly here was not magic. It was the terrifying mutation of virtue. Arthas did not fall because he abandoned his duty. He fell because he pursued it with such fanatical intensity that he circled all the way back to evil. He stood before the gates of Stratholme, not as a guardian, but as an executioner. The hammer in his hand, light's vengeance, hummed with holy power, but the hand gripping it was trembling with a dark resolve. He looked at his soldiers, men who looked at him with fear, not love, and he gave the order that would echo forever in the halls of history. He declared loyalty to the king to be an act of treason. He dissolved the Order of the Silver Hand. In the silence that followed, the hero died. All that remained was the butcher. The gates of Stratholme did not groan when they opened. They swung wide with a terrifying ease, oiled and maintained by the very people who were about to die. It was early morning. The fog from the Darrowmere River still clung to the cobblestones, wrapping the city in a soft gray blanket. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that usually promises a slow, lazy day of market stalls and church bells. But looking through the visor of the prince, that quiet was a lie. To him, the silence was the incubation period. Arthas rode in first. The hooves of his horse, Invincible, clattered loudly against the stone. He did not draw his sword. He unhooked the hammer, Light's vengeance. It was a heavy, two-handed maul blessed by the Archbishop himself. A weapon designed to crush the skulls of orcs and demons. A weapon of war. And here is the horror of the ritual. There was no enemy army to meet them. There were only sleepy townsfolk, rubbing the sleep from their eyes, stepping out onto their porches to wave at their beloved prince. They saw the golden armor. They saw the blue cloaks of the footmen. They smiled. They thought they were saved. Arthas looked at a man, a baker perhaps, with flour still dusted on his apron. The prince's paladin's sight, heightened by adrenaline and paranoia, saw the green sickness pulsing in the man's veins. He saw the scourge waiting to be born. The prince raised the hammer. He did not hesitate. He could not afford to hesitate. If he blinked, he would see a man. If he stared, he saw a monster. The first blow was the loudest sound in the history of the kingdom. It was a wet, sickening crunch that shattered the morning peace. The baker fell. The scream that followed did not come from the dead man, but from his wife. And then, the order was given. Purge them all. This was the invasion. Not from without, but from within. The soldiers of Lordaeron, men trained to die for their people, were forced to turn their blades against them. You could see the tears streaming down their faces beneath their helms. You could hear the retching of the younger squires as they set the torches to the thatched roofs. But they obeyed. They feared the undead, yes, but they feared the look in their prince's eyes even more. The city began to change. The gray fog was replaced by thick, choking black smoke. The smell of rain was incinerated by the stench of burning timber and roasting meat. The sensory overload was absolute. And then, the shadows began to move. Mal'Ganis had arrived. The Dreadlord did not come with an army. He came as a harvester. He materialized in the town square, surrounded by a swarm of carrion beetles and necrotic magic. The contest began. It was a race, a sickening, perverse competition between the prince and the demon, to see who could claim the souls of Stratholme first. The Dreadlord would wave a clawed hand, and a family huddled in a cellar would convulse, their skin turning gray, their eyes glowing with the witch light of the scourge. They would rise, shrieking, tearing at the soldiers who had come to kill them. Arthas roared in fury. He charged into the burning houses. He was a blur of gold and silver, moving with a speed that defied the heavy plate he wore. He struck down the infected before they could turn. He struck down the turning before they could kill. He struck down the healthy because he could not take the risk. Light's vengeance became a conductor's baton for a symphony of slaughter. With every swing, the holy light flared, a brilliant, blinding flash of gold. But in the smoke of Stratholme, the light didn't look holy. It looked like lightning striking a graveyard. It illuminated the terror on the faces of the children hiding under their beds. It highlighted the blood splashing across the white lion crest on Arthas's chestplate. The duality of the paladin was ripped apart. He was using the powers of the divine to commit a massacre. The light, bound by his will and his absolute certainty, obeyed him. But it felt strained. The glow became harsh, feverish. It was no longer the warm embrace of the sun. It was the searing heat of a star about to collapse. The city was screaming, a chorus of thousands. The sound was a physical force, pressing against the eardrums, vibrating in the teeth. But Arthas did not hear screams. He heard only the ticking of a clock. Every second wasted was another soldier added to Mal'Ganis' army. "Faster!" he screamed at his men. "Burn it all. Leave nothing for the Dreadlord." The firestorm grew. The heat was intense enough to melt the lead in the stained glass windows of the chapel. The famous bastion of the Scarlet Enclave was reduced to a blackened skeleton. The streets were slick with a slurry of mud, ash, and blood, a red river flowing toward the drains. In the center of the inferno stood Arthas. His helmet was gone, lost in the melee. His blonde hair was matted with soot and sweat. His eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on a point beyond reality. He was breathing hard, the air rasping in his scorched throat. He looked around at his handiwork. Piles of bodies, some undead, some human. In the chaos, they all looked the same. The distinction had vanished. In his desperate bid to save his people from undeath, he had granted them the only safety he could provide, the finality of this grave. He had won the race. Mal'Ganis was retreating, dissolving into a swarm of bats, his mocking laughter echoing from the burning bell towers. "We will meet again, young prince," the demon whispered in the wind. In the uttermost north, Arthas stood amidst the ruins of his own humanity. He gripped the handle of his hammer so tightly that the leather wrap creaked. He did not look at the bodies. He did not look at his weeping soldiers. He looked north. The firelight danced in his eyes, but it found no reflection of warmth there. The invasion was over. Stratholme was dead. And in its place, something cold and terrible had been born. The fires of Stratholme did not burn out for weeks. They smoldered, turning the sky over the Eastweald a bruised, angry purple. But the screaming, that stopped before dawn. In the end, silence was the loudest thing in the city. Arthas walked through the streets of his victory. The ash fell like snow, coating his golden armor in a layer of gray grime. It settled in his hair, it filled the cracks of his boots. He walked past the bodies of the people he had sworn to protect, and he felt that was the true price of the culling. It wasn't the lives lost. It was the death of the prince's heart. In his desperate bid to stop the plague, he had cauterized his own soul. He had looked into the abyss of necessary evil, and the abyss had not just stared back, it had welcomed him. Jaina was gone. Uther was gone. The moral compass of the kingdom had shattered, leaving Arthas spinning wildly in the dark. He told himself he was right. He told himself that a king must do what a paladin cannot. But as he stood on the docks looking out at the dark, churning waters of the ocean, he didn't look like a king. He looked like a ghost. The hammer, Light's vengeance, felt heavy in his hand. Too heavy. It was a weapon of defense, of justice. It was a tool of the light. And it was no longer enough. The light had failed to save Stratholme. It had failed to stop Mal'Ganis. Arthas realized then that righteousness was a shackle. To hunt a monster, he would need to cut himself loose from the codes of men. He would need a weapon that did not judge, a weapon that did not hesitate. He turned his back on the smoking ruins of his homeland. He turned his back on the warmth of the sun, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sea met the ice. Mal'Ganis had promised a reckoning in the north, a trap surely, but Arthas did not care. The Prince of Lordaeron died in the fires of Stratholme. The man who boarded the flagship was something else entirely. A hunter, a vessel. He commanded the fleet to set sail for the roof of the world, to the frozen wastes of Northrend. There, amidst the glaciers and the ancient darkness, a voice was waiting for him, a whisper in the ice, and a blade that hungered for the blood of a king. The golden age was over. The long winter had begun.